There are wrestlers who looked tough, and there were wrestlers who were tough. And then, in a category that almost nobody else could ever reach, there was the man they called Dr. Death. To the fans in the smoky arenas of the American South in the 1980s, he was a college football hero turned wrecking machine. To the sold-out crowds inside Tokyo's Budokan Hall in the 1990s, he was the most respected foreign wrestler on the planet. A man who reportedly went almost a full decade without having his shoulders pinned to the mat. To the men who shared a locker room with him, he was something close to a force of nature. A genuine all-American athlete with the strength of a bull and a pain tolerance that bordered on inhuman. But here is the part of the story that most people never hear. The man called Dr. Death, the symbol of destruction and dominance, spent the final chapter of his life trying to become something else entirely. He spent it trying to become Dr. Life. And the journey between those two names is one of the most remarkable, inspiring, and ultimately heartbreaking stories in the entire history of professional wrestling. In this video, we are going to tell the complete story of Stephen Franklin Williams. From a shattered nose in a junior high gymnasium that accidentally gave him his legendary nickname, to the wrestling mats of the University of Oklahoma, to the violent glory of All Japan Pro Wrestling, to a single fight in a boxing tournament that may have quietly derailed one of the greatest pushes in wrestling history. And finally, to the 6-year battle against an enemy that no amount of strength could suplex into submission. Stephen Franklin Williams was born on May 14, 1960, in Lakewood, Colorado, a suburb just outside of Denver. He was the youngest of 4 children born to Gerald and Dottie Williams, and from the very beginning, it was obvious that this kid was built differently than the other children in the neighborhood. Some boys grow into athletes. Steve Williams seemed to have been born one. Big for his age, strong, fast, and aggressive in a way that the other kids simply could not match. He threw himself into sports with a kind of total commitment that would define his entire life. At Lakewood High School, he did not just play one sport. He competed on the track and field team, he played football, and he wrestled all 4 years. He was the kind of multi-sport standout that small towns build legends around, the sort of athlete that coaches talk about for decades after he graduates. But it was during those formative years, somewhere back in junior high school, that the most famous accident of his life occurred. The accident that would give him a nickname that would follow him all the way to his grave. During a wrestling situation, young Steve broke his nose. He shattered it badly enough that he could not compete normally. And so, to protect the injury and keep wrestling, he did something that nobody had really seen before. He strapped on a hockey goalie's mask and stepped onto the mat anyway. He refused to sit out. He refused to let an injury stop him. Picture that for a moment. A big, powerful kid refusing to quit, wrestling his opponents while wearing a hockey goalie's mask to protect a face that had already been broken. It looked menacing. It looked terrifying. And one of his coaches, along with his own sister, took one look at this masked young man and jokingly started calling him Dr. Death. The name stuck. It stuck because it fit, and here is the detail that tells you everything about how perfect that nickname was. By the time Steve Williams reached the University of Oklahoma, he was already being called Dr. Death, even in his amateur collegiate athletic career. The nickname predated his entire professional wrestling life. He did not adopt it as a gimmick. He earned it as a teenager, and it simply grew with him. After graduating from Lakewood High School in 1978, Williams accepted a scholarship to the University of Oklahoma, one of the most storied athletic programs in the entire country. And it was there, in Norman, Oklahoma, that he became something almost mythical, a genuine two-sport phenomenon at the highest level of American college athletics. On the football field, Williams played offensive guard for the legendary Oklahoma Sooners. He started every game in 1982 at right guard, earned first-team All-Big 8 conference honors, and competed in some of the biggest games in college football. He was part of the Sooners squads at the 1980 Orange Bowl and the 1981 Sun Bowl, and he played in the 1983 Fiesta Bowl. This was big-time, high-pressure, nationally televised football against the best competition in the nation. And Steve Williams was right in the middle of it, holding the line. But as incredible as his football career was, it was on the wrestling mat that he truly separated himself from ordinary mortals. Competing as a heavyweight for the Sooners, Williams became a 4-time NCAA All-American. 4 times. Read that again because it is staggering. He placed 6th in the country as a freshman, 5th as a sophomore, 3rd as a junior, and 2nd as a senior. A steady, relentless climb toward the top of the entire sport. And in his senior year, he came within a hair of being crowned the best heavyweight wrestler in the entire United States. He reached the finals of the NCAA tournament, 1 match away from a national championship. The man standing across from him in that final was named Bruce Baumgartner. And losing to Baumgartner is nothing to be ashamed of, because Bruce Baumgartner went on to become one of the greatest amateur wrestlers in American history. A man who would win Olympic gold not once, but twice. Williams lost that final by a close decision. He finished as the national runner-up, beaten only by a future Olympic legend. Think about what that resume actually means. It means that Steve Williams was not a fake tough guy. He was not a performer pretending to be an athlete. He was, by any objective measure, one of the most accomplished amateur wrestlers and college football players of his entire generation. When he later stepped into a professional wrestling ring and the announcers called him one of the toughest men alive, they were not exaggerating for the cameras, they were stating a verifiable fact. Williams graduated from Oklahoma in 1981, and the question became what to do with all of that raw athletic ability. The first answer was professional football. In January of 1983, he was selected by the New Jersey Generals in the territorial draft of the United States Football League, a new league that was at the time seriously challenging the established order of pro football. He signed with the Generals just before training camp, where coaches converted him from an offensive lineman into a defensive tackle, and then into a starting nose tackle. He suffered a bruised knee early and spent the first stretch of the season on injured reserve. But he eventually got onto the field, starting at nose tackle in games that were broadcast live on national television. For a brief moment, it looked like Steve Williams might have a future in professional football. But fate and a man named Bill Watts had other plans. While Williams was still finishing up at Oklahoma, he had caught the eye of one of the most influential men in the wrestling business. Cowboy Bill Watts, a WWE Hall of Famer and the promoter behind the rugged, hard-hitting Mid-South wrestling territory, saw something in the young Oklahoma athlete. He saw a legitimate amateur badass with size, charisma, and an authentic toughness that could not be taught. Watts signed the 22-year-old, and along with trainer Buddy Landell, began molding Williams into a professional wrestler. Williams made his debut in 1982, even while his college and football pursuits were still ongoing. And from the moment he stepped through the ropes, the wrestling world took notice. In the Mid-South territory, run with Watts's famously physical, sports-based, no-nonsense philosophy, Dr. Death fit perfectly. He learned the craft alongside future legends. He absorbed knowledge from veterans like the Million Dollar Man and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. By 1985, he had formed a tag team with the Million Dollar Man, and the two of them captured tag team gold together more than once. That same year, the wider wrestling industry recognized his explosive growth when he was named the most improved wrestler. In 1986, Watts rebranded Mid-South into the Universal Wrestling Federation, and it was here that Williams reached his first true singles peak in America. He defeated the massive Big Bubba Rogers, a man who would later become famous as the Big Boss Man, to win the UWF Heavyweight Championship. Dr. Death was now a world champion, carrying a major regional promotion on his enormous shoulders. The Wrestling Observer named him the strongest wrestler in the business multiple years running through the late 1980s, a testament to the fact that his real-life power was simply on a different level than his peers. When the UWF was bought out by Jim Crockett Promotions at the end of 1987, Williams was one of the very few wrestlers from the absorbed company to receive a meaningful push in the NWA. He bounced around several major territories, sharpening his skills, and in 1988, he became a central figure in one of the era's hottest storylines, eventually turning villain and joining Kevin Sullivan's feared stable, the Varsity Club. With Sullivan, he won the United States Tag Team Championship at Starrcade, the biggest show of the year, and teaming with Mike Rotunda, he captured the NWA World Tag Team Championship as well. But amid all of these American accomplishments, the seeds of his greatest partnership and his greatest legacy were being planted. Because around this time, Williams connected with a wild, supremely talented young man from Mississippi named Terry Gordy. Together, they would form a team called the Miracle Violence Connection, and that team was about to take over the wrestling world on the other side of the planet. To understand the next chapter, you have to understand what wrestling in Japan was like in the early 1990s. It was white hot. The promotions there treated wrestling not as cartoonish entertainment, but as a deadly, serious athletic combat sport, almost like a martial art. The matches were stiff. The strikes were real. The crowds were silent and reverent, exploding only at the biggest moments. And the company that embodied this philosophy more than any other was All Japan Pro Wrestling, run by the towering legend, Giant Baba. In this environment, a certain type of foreign wrestler, known as a gaijin, could become an enormous star. Men like Stan Hansen and Big Van Vader had already proven that an intimidating, hard-hitting American could become a top draw in Japan. And when Steve Williams arrived in All Japan in 1990, alongside Terry Gordy, he did not just fit in. He thrived in a way that few foreigners ever had. The Miracle Violence's Connection was a perfect name, because that is exactly what they delivered. Williams and Gordy tore through the competition, capturing the World Tag Team Championship by defeating the legendary duo of Stan Hansen and Genichiro Tenryu. They had wars with the greatest names in Japanese wrestling history, men like Jumbo Tsuruta, Kenta Kobashi, and Mitsuharu Misawa. And it was during this period that Williams achieved a distinction that almost nobody else in the entire history of the business can claim. He became the last man to ever defeat Andre the Giant. On June 5, 1992, in the twilight of Andre's career as the eighth wonder of the world, as he battled the ravages of acromegaly, it was Steve Williams who stood across from him. The two had actually been close friends years earlier in Mid-South, and in one of the most touching gestures in wrestling lore, during one of Williams's tag team title victories, Andre reached out and shook his hand, a quiet, symbolic passing of the torch from one generation of legend to the next. When Andre died in February of 1993, that handshake became something sacred. Williams briefly returned to American television in 1992, reuniting with Gordy in World Championship Wrestling. There, the Miracle Violence Connection defeated the dominant Steiner brothers to win the WCW World Tag Team Championship, and they ran through a tournament to claim the NWA World Tag Team titles as well. They were named Tag Team of the Year, but America was just a side trip. Williams's heart and his greatest success remained in Japan. Back in All Japan, after Andre's passing, Williams transformed himself into a singles powerhouse. He began defeating the company's top native stars one after another. He beat Akira Tao, he beat Kenta Kobashi, he beat Jun Akiyama. Giant Baba, recognizing what he had, booked Williams as a genuine main event attraction, and the once skeptical Japanese audience gradually came to adore him. The crowning achievement came on July 28, 1994. On that night, Steve Williams defeated the top star in the entire company, the great Mitsuharu Misawa, to win the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship, the most prestigious singles title in all Japan. For an American to dethrone Misawa, the ace of the promotion, was almost unthinkable. Williams held that championship for 3 months before dropping it to another legend, Toshiaki Kawada. By the time his Japanese career was complete, Williams had won the World Tag Team Championship an astonishing 8 separate times, partnering with Gordy, with Gary Albright, with Johnny Ace, and with Vader. He won the prestigious World's Strongest Tag Determination League multiple times, and the legend grew that for roughly 10 years, across all of his Japanese touring, Steve Williams was never pinned. A man so dominant that the most skilled wrestlers in the world could not put his shoulders down for a 3 count. Much of this dominance came down to his arsenal. Most wrestlers had a single finishing move. Williams had 3, and every one of them looked like it could end a man's career. There was the Dr. Bomb, a brutal gut-wrench powerbomb that drove his opponent into the canvas. There was the backdrop driver, a high-angle belly-to-back suplex that dropped opponents on the back of their necks. And there was his signature, the Oklahoma Stampede, a powerful slam that paid tribute to the college where it all began. When Dr. Death hit you with one of those, the match was over. And there was a reason his offense looked so devastating. Because with Steve Williams, the line between performance and reality was thinner than it was with almost anyone else in the business. His amateur background meant that he knew how to take a man down and hold him there for real. His football strength meant that when he grabbed an opponent, there was no faking the power behind it. Wrestlers who worked with him often spoke about how stiff he could be, how every suplex and every slam carried the genuine threat of injury. Not because he was reckless, but because that raw force was simply who he was. In the hard-hitting world of All Japan, where audiences demanded that matches feel like real fights, that authenticity was worth its weight in gold, it made Dr. Death must-see television, a foreign monster who looked like he could legitimately hurt anyone he faced, because in real life, he absolutely could. He was, in this era, one of the most successful and respected foreign wrestlers in the entire history of Japanese professional wrestling. He had reached the absolute mountaintop, but the higher you climb, the further there is to fall, and behind the unstoppable image, the real Steve Williams was a human being who was beginning to struggle. In early 1995, Williams went through a painful divorce. The man who could not be beaten in the ring was being beaten by life outside of it. He sank into depression, and like so many wrestlers of that hard-living era, he turned to substances to numb the pain. Painkillers, marijuana, and other drugs became a way to cope with the emotional wreckage and the constant physical agony of the business. The lowest point came in March of 1995. Struggling and desperate, Williams made the reckless decision to smuggle drugs onto a plane bound for Japan. He was caught. The consequences were severe. He was barred from even entering the country for an entire year and suspended from All Japan Pro Wrestling. In a single moment, the addiction nearly destroyed everything he had built. And this is where one of the most important relationships of his life proved its worth. Giant Baba, the legendary owner of All Japan, did not simply cut Williams loose. Instead, Baba helped him. He supported him through his darkest period, stood by him as he fought to get clean, and gave him a path back. Williams would later speak about loving Giant Baba like his own father, which carried a heavy weight because Williams's actual father had died years earlier in the mid-1980s. Baba filled a void in his life that ran far deeper than wrestling. With Baba's support, and with a renewed and deepening Christian faith that had been growing inside him since his early days in Japan, Williams pulled himself out of the abyss. He got clean. He returned to All Japan Television in April of 1996, rebuilt his life and his career, and rededicated himself. From late 1990 onward, he had been known among the boys for a particular habit. Before every single match, Steve Williams would pray backstage. That faith, which had once been a quiet, private thing, was becoming the central organizing principle of his entire existence. Even after the divorce, Williams remained close with his ex-wife, and he was a devoted father to his son Wyndham and to a daughter Stormy, whom he had adopted. The terrifying Dr. Death, it turned out, was at his core a deeply spiritual family man trying his best to do right. By 1998, after years of glory in Japan, Steve Williams finally got the call that so many American wrestlers dream of. The biggest wrestling company in the world, the World Wrestling Federation, wanted to sign him, and the plans they had for him were enormous. This was the height of the Attitude Era, the most explosive period of popularity in American wrestling history. The company's biggest star was Stone Cold Steve Austin, the beer-drinking, authority-defying anti-hero who was selling out arenas across the country. And the plan, the genuine plan, was to bring in the legitimate tough guy Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and build him into a monster heel to challenge Austin at the very top of the card. By Williams' own account, his contract promised a 6-month feud with Stone Cold himself. He was being positioned to become a main event superstar in the biggest promotion on Earth, the final validation of everything he had worked for. And then came one of the most infamous bad ideas in the history of professional wrestling: the Brawl For All. The concept, pushed by a creative mind in the company, was a legitimate, unscripted shoot-fighting tournament. Real punches, real takedowns, actual competition between professional wrestlers who were not used to fighting for real. On paper, the idea was to crown Dr. Death as the toughest man in the company, a perfect way to launch his run. He was the heavy favorite. Everyone expected him to win. He was, after all, a 4-time NCAA All-American. In the first round, Williams won, defeating Pierre-Carl Ouellet. So far, so good. But in the second round, he was matched against a wrestler named Bart Gunn, a man who, as it turned out, had real boxing ability and serious knockout power. And in that fight, disaster struck twice. During the bout, Williams tore his quadriceps muscle, a devastating leg injury. And then, while compromised, he was knocked out cold by Bart Gunn. In a matter of minutes, the entire plan collapsed. The man who was supposed to be built up as an unbeatable monster had been knocked unconscious on live television, and he had suffered a major injury that would sideline him for months. The Brawl For All did the opposite of what it was designed to do. It is widely regarded as having damaged careers rather than building them, and nobody's career was hurt more than Steve Williams's. He missed several months recovering from the torn quad. When he finally returned in early 1999, he was placed in mid-card storylines, including a stint managed by his close friend and broadcasting legend Jim Ross, and feuds over the Hardcore Championship. According to Williams himself, these mid-card programs were meant to slowly rebuild his character before finally launching that promised feud with Austin. The main event push, he believed, was still coming, but it never arrived. Williams was released in the spring of 1999, in part because he needed more time to rehabilitate his injury, and in part due to disagreements over which Japanese promotion he would work with. The great what-if of his career, the Stone Cold feud that could have made him a household name in America, vanished forever. One of the genuinely toughest men in the world had his biggest opportunity destroyed by a single punch in a tournament that should never have existed. He had a brief return to World Championship Wrestling late in 1999, including a strange storyline where he was managed by a character who was a thinly veiled parody of his real friend Jim Ross. But his American moment had passed. So Steve Williams did what he had always done. He went back home to the place that truly loved him. He returned to All Japan Pro Wrestling for a second full-time run from 2000 to 2003, where he was embraced as a loyalist and a living link to the legacy of Giant Baba, who had sadly passed away in early 1999. For a few more years, Dr. Death soldiered on, his body battered by 2 decades of brutal Japanese-style wrestling, but his spirit unbroken. He could not have known that the most dangerous opponent of his entire life was already growing silently inside him. In March of 2004, Steve Williams stepped into an entirely different kind of ring. He took a mixed martial arts fight in the K1 promotion in Japan against a Belarusian kickboxer named Alexei Ignashov. It went badly. Williams was knocked out in just 22 seconds. It would be his first and only professional MMA fight. But the loss in that cage was nothing compared to the news he was carrying. According to Williams, just a couple of days before that fight, he had received a diagnosis that would change everything. He had throat cancer. A tumor had been quietly developing and going undetected in his body, by some accounts since the previous September. Later that same month, Williams underwent surgery to fight the disease, and the treatment that saved his life also took something precious from him. Steve Williams, the man whose booming voice and intense promos had thrilled crowds in 2 countries, lost the ability to speak normally. To communicate, he would now have to rely on an electrolarynx, a small device that produced a flat, mechanical, robotic voice. For a lesser man, this might have been the end of the public story. But Steve Williams refused to disappear, and he refused to be defined by self-pity. In March of 2005, he received the news he had been praying for. He was declared cancer-free. And he chose to mark this victory in the most public and meaningful way imaginable. On Japanese wrestling television, he stepped in front of the cameras, unveiled his new electronic voice box to the world, and announced his survival. It was here that the transformation that had been building his entire life finally became complete. The man named Death decided that he would now be known as Dr. Life. That phrase, the journey from Dr. Death to Dr. Life, was not just a clever turn of words. It became the mission of his remaining years. Williams poured himself into Christian motivational speaking. He traveled and shared his story, the story of a feared destroyer who had battled depression, addiction, and finally cancer, and who had come through all of it with his faith stronger than ever. In 2007, he published his autobiography, telling that entire arc with forewords written by his friend Jim Ross and his old Oklahoma football coach Barry Switzer. The title said it all. It was the story of how Dr. Death became Dr. Life. He even returned to the wrestling business in a new role, this time as a teacher. The WWE, the very company that had once let him go, brought him back in 2006 to help train young up-and-coming wrestlers in its developmental territory, Ohio Valley Wrestling. The unstoppable competitor had become a mentor, passing his hard-won knowledge to the next generation, just as men like Bill Watts and Giant Barber had once done for him. He appeared at WWE events, telling crowds how grateful he was simply to be alive and cancer-free. For 4 years, it seemed like Dr. Life had won. The cancer was gone. His message was reaching people. He had found peace. But cancer is a cruel and patient enemy, and eventually it returned. As his health began to decline once more, Williams faced a series of painful losses. In June of 2009, his longtime rival and friend, Mitsuharu Misawa, the very man he had once defeated for the Triple Crown, died after collapsing in the ring during a match in Japan. The death of Misawa hit Williams hard, and it helped push him toward a difficult decision. After 27 years in the business he loved, Steve Williams decided to retire. His final match took place on August 15, 2009, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, not far from where his story had begun all those years earlier. He won, capturing one last championship, and then he walked away, vacating the title. It was a fitting end. A champion to the very last. His final public appearance came on December 12, 2009, at a wrestling convention in Carteret, New Jersey, where he met fans and signed autographs even as his body was failing him. The throat cancer that he had fought so bravely had spread, and there was nothing more that medicine could do. On December 29, 2009, at St. Anthony Central Hospital in Denver, Colorado, surrounded by the city where he was raised, Stephen Franklin Williams died. He was only 49 years old. The man who had been the last to beat Andre the Giant, the man who reportedly went a decade without being pinned. The strongest wrestler of his era was finally beaten by the one opponent that strength could not touch. In the years since his passing, the wrestling world has worked to make sure that Dr. Death is never forgotten. He was inducted into the George Tragos and Lou Thez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. He was honored by the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, and in 2021, The WWE posthumously inducted Steve Williams into its Hall of Fame as part of the Legacy Wing, a long overdue recognition from the company that had once planned to make him a mega star. So what do we make of the life of Stephen Franklin Williams? When you step back and look at the whole picture, a clear and powerful theme emerges. This was a man defined by an almost supernatural toughness. A four-time All-American, a college football star, a wrestler so strong and so legitimately dangerous that the toughest men in the world spoke of him with genuine awe. He conquered America and then he conquered Japan, becoming one of the greatest foreign wrestlers to ever live. By any measure of in-ring accomplishment, he is one of the most decorated wrestlers of his generation. But the real story, the one that elevates him from a great athlete into something more, is the second half of his life. Because the same fierce will that made him unbeatable on the mat was the will he turned against his own demons. He used it to climb out of addiction. He used it to rebuild his life after a devastating divorce. He used it to face down a cancer diagnosis with his head held high. And when that cancer stole his voice, he found a new way to speak, and he used that mechanical voice to bring a message of hope and faith to anyone who would listen. There is a deep and beautiful irony at the center of his story. A man saddled with the nickname Dr. Death, a name born from a shattered nose and a hockey mask in a junior high gym, spent his final years insisting that he was now Dr. Life. He took the most frightening name in wrestling and turned it inside out, transforming a symbol of destruction into a symbol of survival, redemption, and grace. That, perhaps, is the true legacy of Steve Williams. Not just the suplexes and the championships, though there were plenty of those. Not just the legitimate toughness that terrified his peers, though that was very real. The true legacy is the example of a man who was, for his entire life, a fighter, and who proved that the most important fights are not the ones that take place inside a wrestling ring. He fought for victories in the ring, and he won most of them. But the fight he is most remembered for now, by those who knew his whole story, is the quiet, dignified, 6-year battle he waged against an enemy he could not see. A fight he faced not with rage but with faith. He may not have won that final match, but in the way he fought it, in the way he transformed his name and his purpose, in the lives he touched on his way out, Dr. Death became something far greater than a wrestler. He became Dr. Life. And that is a championship that can never be taken away. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and legacy of Dr. Death, Steve Williams, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more biographies of the legends who shaped professional wrestling. Until next time.